All right. Transitioning to live. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Amazon's New World. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks know what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, on this podcast, we finally go back to talking about games after talking about movies for the last 80 gazillion years. So the new Amazon MMO has come out. It is called New World. And it was highly, it was super anticipated. People played a beta, people played another beta. It was coming out on August 31st, then it got pushed back to now.
Oh, no. Buddy.
Well, you're right. It was supposed to come out in the beginning of the year, right?
It was supposed to come out the year before that in May. It's been pushed back like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, wow. I remember it got pushed back from February to August and then from August to September. I didn't realize that it was supposed to come out in 2020.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find this real quick. So a quick Google says that it's supposed to come out in 2019. Let me see.
Wow. Wow. I'm really honestly flabbergasted by it. Wow. 2019 and it is coming out.
That is what that is. So May 2020 is the one I remember. So that is not okay. I think it was
Okay.
I think it was like originally announced as like 2019 as that ephemeral original release date, right? Like kind of like coming 2019. The first nailed down release date was May 2020, then August 2020, then spring 2021, then August 2021, and finally it released like, a couple weeks ago.
What changed? Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean,
sure.
Are you aware? You're aware of what happened with Crucible, right?
No. There's so much backstory to this. Tell me all of that. Give me the lore.
So, apparently there were 3 games. One of them got canceled right away, which is called like Breakaway or something. Crucible was like a CS:GO type shooter that got released, and then pulled into beta, and then pulled off, and then canceled. Which was and then like this is like while New World is chugging away in the background. But New World is finally released.
Oh my god. Okay, I actually do remember this. Now that I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it, I do remember this drama from last year. Because I remember they announced that the development would end. It was this time last year. It was October 9th, 2020. They announced that it would be discontinued. It was a big thing on Twitter that day. And I learned all of this lore for one day on Twitter.
Yeah. And and a year later, and so I think with along the backdrop of that, like New World just kept getting pushed back. It's like, well, this is the one that's still around, so maybe we should make sure it's good.
Wow.
I played in, I want to say last spring's beta, and I was not impressed. If you remember, I discussed this briefly on the podcast, that I was like, out. And I was initially not going to jump in on it, and then friends of the cast, Monica and X, jumped into it and said it was good. And it's interesting because it has some of this. So some of the things I pointed out were like that it had these like weird like quality of life problems. It still has those problems, or it still has the mechanics that cause them to be problems. It just doesn't have the problems. I think it's very interesting actually, because it's done a thing that I've been saying would be interesting to do. And they finally did it, which is essentially the servers are really small. Just kind of but before we jump into it. We're playing on separate servers because of some of these issues.
So one of the first things I heard about the game was that it was very sensitive to input lag.
Yeah, it's an action.
That there's a lot of it's a very split second action kind of game, right? So the recommendation was made not to play on a US East server and to play on a US West server. So I went and I found my friend, friend of the cast, Phalanor, who's been on the cast before, is playing. I asked him what server he was on. He's like, this one on US West. I was like, perfect. I joined up. I have not talked to him since. We're not even in the same faction. But I just, generally speaking, wanted to see what if there were hardcore social systems or something that I was going to have to like engage in or whatever. So I am on Saskatoon or something. Some weird server, name.
Saskatoon's like a Canadian city.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I knew it was wrong.
Yeah, I'm on UPana, but EU Pana,
But yeah, so the servers are small.
But before we dive into it,
Okay.
General impressions, like up, thumbs down, thumbs
My
sideways.
my core thought playing this game was that line from Knives Out where Daniel Craig's character, the inspector, goes, "It doesn't make any damn sense. Compels me though." And that's what this game is like. I played it and I was like, wow, this kind of sucks. This is not great. I'm not having a good time. But also, I kept playing. And I also was like, I was in this weird liminal space of just like, I recognized in a true sense that I was not having fun, but I also recognized that like number go up and in like no thoughts head empty, just kind of something to sit there and walk up to a tree and you press E and you just turn to the other screen for 20 seconds and then you turn back or whatever. It was like the perfect thing. It's one of the I and so that's my core takeaway. I kind of don't think the game is good. I think the game is bad, but in the weirdest way, in the way that I have loved games like WoW and Diablo and Hearthstone over the course of, whatever, just like as a digital fidget cube, it is incredible and has really, I am compelled even now. I want to like go log on and play and start grinding fucking trees. I
It-
don't know what the trees are for. I just have like a gazillion aged logs or whatever in my, whatever my storage that I don't even have access to because I moved zones, and so I don't even. I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing with my life playing this game? But yeah, that's my review
yeah,
of New World so far.
yeah. So I, funnily enough, you're talking about like being compelled to. I am signed up for a war at 9:30, which is like very fun,
Whoa,
very funny to me. It's like you know, I have to. It's like when you used to have like for Eve Online, if you were gonna have a big space battle, they asked that you like fill out a form. That way, they could like dedicate servers to it. Um,
sure.
but I think this. So like, there's like the wars all happen at specific times, which is very very funny diegetically. It's like everybody sign up and line up at 9:30 to go to war. Right, 9:30 is
Yeah.
wartime, boys. Um, and I might not make it. I'm kind of on the back list, but I'll probably get pulled in because we don't have enough people. But I'm low level.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually don't know how that I don't know how that works. I didn't sign up for a war, but there was a war happening at 9 your time. So right at the end of this cast, I was like, should I log on and try and get in this war? But the thing is that I kind of don't think I'm interested in the PvP. This does not seem like a fun PvP game to me. This seems like a PvP game that would really fucking frustrate me, to be honest.
It might, but
Um
I also don't know why you would play the game if you weren't into the like that
Yeah,
is
well,
like
that seems to be the case. I was like, somebody was like, "Oh, there's dungeons." I was like, "Really? Dungeons? Like what?" And there was like, "Yeah, there's 3 of them." I was like, "What the fuck?" Like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of my other top level thoughts of this game was it's like the worst parts of WoW without the best parts of WoW, right? Like, somebody once talked about how on Reddit there was a player who was complaining that he couldn't get 233 gear except by going raiding or doing Mythic Plus or whatever. And the truth was you can get it in Korthia, but you have to like grind an obscene amount of these, stupid things or whatever. And the top comment on that thread was somebody going, "Why the fuck do you need 233 gear to do chat like Korthia dailies?" Like what possibly, how is that possibly requiring that much gear? And obviously that person's sort of missing the point, right? But
right.
like when it comes to World of Warcraft, right? Most of the sort of open world stuff, that's never going to be where the challenge is, right? The challenge is going to be in dungeons, it's going to be in raiding, right? Like that is kind of the game at its height. That is the game at its best, right? And as much as I think that open world stuff sort of matters and is good, like I really like doing open world stuff in WoW, and I continue to do it, even though I cognitively understand that like those maw assaults are not a difficult challenge for me anymore. I still go do them every week. They're just a fun time or whatever, right? They feature these characters, these Shadowlands characters that I enjoy a lot. They're just interesting quests that are a little bit more complicated than your normal dailies or whatever. And I'm just sort of like happy to do that. There is not a single quest I have played in New World that is more complicated than go to place, kill a guy. Like every single one, it's go to place, kill a single guy, which is maybe the hardest quest I've ever had to do. There's go to place and open chests, go to place and kill lots of little guys that are just all around all of the time. And nope, it might just be those three. Is there another one?
So there's a couple. There's a couple. There's go to place, open spot on the ground that isn't technically a chest, and there's go to place, kill an animal and skin it.
Oh yeah. So there's also go to place, kill an animal and skin it. I've done that. I have never done go to place and open a spot on the ground or whatever. So it's like, and people, I understand people get frustrated by some of these like more advanced WoW quests or whatever, but there's just like nothing besides go to place, kill a guy apparently in the quest design. Oh, there's also I'm not including these. There's also grind a boatload of resource, right?
Yeah.
Grind 400 wood is also a quest that you could do if you want. And I'm just like, how did somebody think this was like a good idea? Like for the entire quest structure to be the most boring, least compelling quests kind of available, right? And I think the answer is that the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is more complicated and more fun than WoW, right? It is probably more fun for me to go to place and kill a guy in terms of using my spear attack and blocking incoming attacks than it is to go to place and hit 1-2-4-2-1 or whatever my rotation is in WoW, right? And so that's kind of my bedrock thought. But the worst part is that I have also been playing another game, which is combat remarkably similar, that is all about melee stuff, about light attacks, heavy attacks, blocking abilities or whatever, in Vermintide. And I think Vermintide is far, far superior, just mechanically, in terms of how the builds that like how you can build your character, how your character interacts with the world around you, and the way that the enemies are designed, and actually inserting some kind of like real scalable challenge into those experiences. So
no, I
man,
get it.
I'm really mean to New World. This is a game I played I played 12 hours in like 3 days or something. Like
similarly.
You would think I would be nicer.
No, and I'm much more positive on the game, but that's partially because like, I grew up with friend of the cast Monic, right? Like, and we won't be near each other, but he'll be like, "Oh man, I'm like." There was this moment over the weekend where he was like, "I'm in a fight, and I see he's like 200 meters away. I'm just like sprint my way over there, up on a hill, and I like aim my musket and I shoot the guy, right? And then all of a sudden it's a 2-on-1. Then one of his friends comes in, and it's a 2-on-2, and we barely managed to scrape by the skin of our teeth, and we won. And that's like so much fun. But like if you don't want to do that, there's like the crafting system is like is intricate. It's not complex in execution like say 14's crafting system is. But it is intricate in kind of the way the recipes go, and I think it's got maybe a little bit too much of a floor, right? And also like a little bit too arcane. Like I'm at the it has the same problem that like WoW has, where like your middling gear and like your low level gear, no one actually wants because it's all like below what you can get off of drops. Apparently, the high end crafted gear is like equivalent to end game gear otherwise, right? Like it's equivalent to dungeon gear, so it's not like you fall off that cliff. But I think the game also wants to be Minecraft, but like without like the like structure building part. Like you can buy a house and furnish it, but like you don't get like the like the kind of like build anything anywhere stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a piece of that I feel for sure. I recommended the game to Rachel specifically on the grounds of it's kind of like Valheim a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Going out and grinding trees and then but putting that into whatever your intricate crafting structure is reminded me a lot of kind of like the magic of what made Valheim incredibly compelling, right? And and I don't have a ton of hours. How many hours did I put into Valheim? Like I don't have a ton of hours in Valheim. Why does it not show me? Oh, I have 120 hours in Valheim, right?
Not which a ton.
Which is a lot, but it is not a lot for me, right? Like that doesn't crack my top 10, probably doesn't even crack my top 20 in terms of like games played overall. But I think that one thing that New World is really missing is kind of like the magic. I kind of feel like New World was built to capture the feeling of classic WoW, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have any of the charm of the WoW unit, like the classic WoW universe. Like the thing that really sells me on the classic WoW experience, right? Even if like it's ultimately an experience that I put down and kind of put away, right? Was it was the questing, it was the world, it was walking into Stormwind or Orgrimmar for the first time and being kind of blown away by this stuff. It was doing, these aren't incredibly complicated stories, right? But doing the story of the Defias Brotherhood again on classic WoW was actually really engaging because it wasn't something I had touched in a long time, and I kind of forgot that story has like, I mean, they're very basic by modern standards, but like they're legitimate plot twists and reveals, right? People think of Edwin Van Cleef because he's the dungeon boss, obviously, but Van Cleef himself was actually not really the leader he was kind of more of a figurehead. And there's a bunch of questing content after the Dead Mines where you go and then you go to the stockades and you kill, this other, like the other guy, and then you find out that there's a noble and you assassinate the noble in Stormwind Keep or whatever. And like that's a storyline that's like really engaging, right? That you can kind of bootstrap into. And there's tons of these, right? All over the classic WoW experience. From, Mancrick's wife to, the like Loch Modan, Dark Iron, like killing these Dark Iron dwarves and dealing with like the Dark Iron dwarves in Loch Modan and Searing Gorge and whatever else, right? And I just don't have any of that in New World. I there are no characters to latch onto. There's no interesting.
I mean, there's one. Like, there's one character who has a story. Like, have you been playing the main quest?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the guy who stands at the fisherman's bed and slowly regains his memories. Like, I will agree with you that there's not a lot there.
But... Okay, yeah, okay. I have done the first quest of that guy, so I have not done a lot of it.
Okay, like he is the main quest, and like he also like unlocks more mechanics too. Like, what level are you at this point?
18.
Okay, I'm like level 20, and at level 25 is when you can start like really interacting with the big corruption spikes. And you have to do the quest to get there. You have to do like a quest to get a
interesting. Okay, yeah. So the reason that this is, and I think this is actually like a design thing that maybe I hit in a weird way, is I went and I did the main quest in my one zone, and it took me to that guy, right? But that guy was in another zone. He was in a second zone, and as soon as I entered that zone, I went to the settlement, and then I picked up a bunch of quests in that settlement, and then I did those quests. So I only did one quest to go talk to that guy, and then he sent me on something that was really nearby. So I went and I just did that real quick. And you find out that he you like go read a painting or something in a
you go read a bunch of stuff. That is another quest type that we missed, which is almost exclusive to him, which is like walk up to a thing and read a bit of lore, or don't read it, and then
but then I went and I did a bunch of questing in the new zone that was the exact same as the questing in the old zone. It was the corruption is bad. We're fighting against the corruption. Help us fight against the corruption. And so I guess I kind of did the intro quests in two different zones back to back, which is maybe my fault for whatever.
Yeah, no, I think there's a weak point. I think they try and put a couple of those out, that way you can like I'm playing in the Syndicate faction, and they did not control First Light. I think the whatever the Crusader faction is controlled First Light.
So this is an interesting thing. I did not start in First Light. I think you can start all over the map. I started in Monarch Bluffs, but Rachel started in another zone entirely. And I went to a third zone and I saw that there were level 2 mobs. And I was like, what the fuck are level 2 mobs doing here? And I realized, I was like, oh my God, you can start anywhere.
Yeah, like, you can run there if you want. Right, which is what I was going to say. And I did not. I was just like, screw it. Because like there's some like minor, like, you're improving the status of this territory that you don't control, and that's that. Like, I knew what faction I was joining, right? Because Monica X had already picked out the faction.
Do you have to be in the same faction to be in like the same guild or whatever?
Yes, like it is like your faction is like everything essentially. Like your faction is your super guild. It's where you do all like the what I think is the interesting stuff. But like just to wind it back a little bit, like the reason we're playing on separate servers, I think, is important. Like, you need the lag, and I think, like I was saying, something that I think that is very interesting in doing is they're very small servers, and so they want the servers to be relatively tight knit communities, and they want everybody on the East Coast to be on the same, like, be they want everybody on the East Coast servers to be on the East Coast.
In the same time zone. Yeah, that would make sense.
The timing makes sense. and that kind of thing. And I think they don't want us playing on the same server because of that stuff, right? And they also want to be able to run a game with like high action combat. With that, you can't have bad lag, which
yeah,
kind of sucks. But like from like a 10,000 foot view, it makes sense, right? Like if you've got 2,000 people on a server, which is like the number I heard, I don't know if that's true or not. But if it's 2,000 people on a server, you don't need like we don't need we don't need to be building a group together, right? Like the ideally that connection should be coming organically out of the community.
yeah. And you also don't have any needs for the like, so for instance, in WoW, you can get away with kind of like people in Brazil will play on US servers famously, right? And their input lag will be, 250 ms, but because of the global cooldown, that kind of doesn't matter all that much,
Yeah,
right? Like outside of maybe like snap mechanics or like interrupts or whatever, most of the time, you're just hitting one button every 1.5 seconds, 1 second sometimes, like obviously
yeah,
depending on haste or whatever else. So like there's a lot of leeway there, and that's good if you're creating a raid group, for instance, right? You need to be recruiting 20 people to fill out a mythic raid. But if you are, doing these smaller scale, there's no raiding, obviously. In New World, there's the wars and there's the outpost thing, right? Like that's like a battleground. It's my
yeah.
understanding of
There's
what
like various forms
outposts
of
are.
PvP, but like
Yeah.
it's action combat, so you need like tightness of
Mm.
interactions. Um, yeah. Um, Boy, but I think the game is made like a bunch like so. This is to wind it all the way back to the things I thought were a problem in the beta. It has a lot of
Okay.
these like quality of life problems, right? Where it's like you can fight over like nodes are unique to are not unique, right? Like so,
Mhm.
or rather like there's one node and you fight over them essentially. Not directly because if you've got PvP turned off, but like or if there's somebody's in faction, but only one person can mine a node. And like if I kill a wolf and somebody runs up to it, they can skin it before I can get to it, right? That type of thing. And that was a big problem in the beta because you had like gobs of people in the same place because they were spawning everybody in New Light, right? Um, and that problem, that like theoretical problem, is still there, but it's not a real problem because there's not enough people like gobbed in a place for it to be a real to be like a real issue, right? Like, I think that's
It got
interesting way to solve it.
like because it was 2 weeks after, right? Like you
Yeah,
and I have sort of dodged that problem, comparatively speaking, compared to, somebody who's playing day one. I'm sure that there were, I mean, I heard there were a bunch of servers who's day one, but I'm sure that there was like more of a gate in the say this always happens with WoW stuff too, right? Like there was that one bug with the eyeglass. Only one person could use an eyeglass at a time on the server, and it was like a hard stopping point for like all of this kind of progression. So yeah,
yeah,
I feel like that's just kind of launch. That's just kind of like launch stuff. Though I have been frustrated a couple of times to be like running through a place and you see a little tick. I'm not a place with mining that I can see iron on the map,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I still need iron for crafting. So it's like, ooh, and you run over to the iron thing, and somebody's already getting the node, and you're just like, oh fuck me.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the desired. I think like having a little bit of that is part of the desired experience. Having a lot of that maybe isn't right. Like if there's a swarm of people like jumping on all the nodes, it's probably a problem. Um, but this is another thing that's interesting is I think all the resources are useful all the way through, right? Like um, and like on top of this, something that I was told about by Monic is that like the higher level zones don't have flint on the ground. There's always like a market for people to like drag flint from the newbie zones to the
Interesting.
yeah. They've made a bunch of really interesting design decisions. I think it's going to be a long tail before I figure out if I think that all of them are good or not. But like stuff
Mhm.
like that, I think is at the very least interesting ways to solve like kind of these um, classic
MMO
problems.
problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and it like it all stems, I think, from that very kind of like there's only so many people on the server, and so like um, it's it's it only get you're only gonna you only have like a set amount of stuff to work with, I guess. And there's also like severe character limits, right? Like I think you can get like two per like server group. Like I think you can only get like two on US East, at all, right? Like so, which is, you but like it's also got that 14 thing where everybody can be good at everything if you put enough effort. I think.
Mhm.
Um,
That's a really interesting thing, right? Like I feel like alts are a very important part of like the way we think about MMOs, we used to think about MMOs, right? But as kind of 14 has taken, has risen in popularity. I feel like we're going to see more and more games that are like this one, where everybody can do everything. I see that a lot in WoW. I would hate if that came to WoW, right? But I see it a lot where people say like, "Oh, I wish I could, be a mage and also a warrior or whatever on my main." And I understand that impulse, but I just don't think that's
So I don't think
a
it
WoW
works.
thing.
I don't think it works for WoW in particular because it's too easy to like get to end state. Like WoW is about like grinding at, and like the game starts at
Mm.
60, which is true again weirdly. It seems that like that's not the case for New World, and on top of that, like this is like as slow, if not slower, than like WoW level, like classic WoW level progression in terms of like getting there, and that's like true for like everything, right? So like you could do everything, but I don't think there's going to be anybody who has everything maxed for a while.
Yep. It takes an insane amount of grinding, it feels like. I mean, even just when I pick up a new weapon, right? Like, something that I did very quickly was I was like, okay, well, when I pick up a new weapon that's better, I'm gonna try and use that weapon as much as I possibly can, because I would rather, get to a point where, one of the big pain points of classic WoW, for instance, is
Weapon skills.
weapon skill. Yeah, and you have to sit there with your two-handed axe and just like, whiff, whiff, miss kind of thing. And I was like, God, it's gonna be the same fucking thing when it comes to, like when it comes to New World or whatever. So I think I have basically every weapon. I'm missing a couple. Basically every weapon have all three of their abilities unlocked, right? Which is level 4, I think. You choose a spec, for lack of a better term, and then you have those three abilities, and you can get the first 3 points you spend or those three abilities, and that's good. I'm at least at that point, and I feel pretty comfortable using everything. But also, like, they all scale off of different
Yep.
abilities.
Different
And like
stats. Yeah.
yeah, so like I went very hard for strength, because at first I was using a great axe and a warhammer, but like now I'm using like a spear or something like that, and it's like, at what point am I going to find a fire staff, and then be like, oh shit, should I respec to, I don't know, intelligence or whatever, and become a caster?
See, I have gone hard on I'm doing Warhammer Musket, and I knew I was going to do that for a while. I'm just like I only do those, right? Because like I want to like push those skills up the tree. Uh,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
So what level, like, mastery or whatever are you on those
I
two?
am, I think, like 5 or 6. Part of it is that like PvP, like PvP boosts your mastery a lot. Like if you get a kill,
Okay.
that's an interesting thing too. Is PvP has like decent, like it gives you a big boost to mastery. If you kill someone, you get like they'll drop, like it's not one of their items, but they drop an item, right? So you can like do stuff with it. It's not totally useless. Kind of like in WoW, right? Like WoW is just kind of like a thing that annoys people, whereas like in New World,
In New
it's like
World, there's a real incentive for it, right?
yeah, exactly. It's also a little bit more painful. Like I don't know if you how many times you've died, but like there's like 3 tiers of like of um of like spawning, and like campfires you can place wherever you want, but they're like kind of like your corpse in WoW, where it's like when you like you've got a delay on when you if you die too many times. And there's like you have to place it yourself, so who knows where it is. I think this might be a long-term problem because like I was fighting someone, and then their buddy came in, they killed me, but I almost had them killed. But my spawn point was really close, so I spawned and immediately pulled out my musket and killed them. Which
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, which is super amusing. But like I don't know if that's like a good design decision, right? Because they very clearly didn't have like a spawn point nearby. Although it does
Yeah.
like by that guy that that big quest giver, there's always people PvPing, which is fun, and somebody always has a campfire up. So like if you want to just like do open world PvP and like go for it, you can like do it there. It's not a problem.
Yeah, that
Um,
was something that was interesting about Sea of Thieves too, right? Like I remember that was, and I actually kind of like that because you respawn on your ship, but your ship can be destroyed, right?
right,
So the objective in some of those PvP fights that we had in Sea of Thieves wasn't kill guys, it was sink the ship. Because
right,
once the ship is sunk, they respawn at the port, like, like they're out of the boonies kind of thing.
right.
Which I always really like that interaction. And it's not really something, I guess I don't know, I could destroy their camp. That just seems
You can't, right?
even like that would be
Yeah,
ridiculous.
you just
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those pieces where the PvE aspect of the game and the PvP aspect of the game are in conflict, I think. Like the thing that the camp is for that I was using at one point is I got a quest to go to a place. I was like level 16, had like level 24 mobs. And if I played impeccably, I could kill those level 24 mobs, right? But it took everything I had, right? And I was dying a lot. And the camp is there so that when you die, you can respawn and kind of come back into it, come back into it, come back into it, kind of thing, right? Like, it was actually, you know what it was? It was the first quest for the guy, and there's like a silver mob, which I guess is some form of elite. Um, and the silver mob was also near three other mobs, and they were all in their levels 20, and I was level 16. Um, and so like that was a place where I was like, oh, I need to put a campfire here because I'm probably gonna die a bunch of times. And I think that's what the campfire is like designed for, but it also has this implication for like the PvP state of the game.
Yeah.
That is,
So I think that's like not so bad though, because like it's mostly luck at that point, right? Because most of your PvP happens kind of in places in between. I think.
yeah.
And if it's happening at a destination, they want you to be able to spawn back and like do the quests if you want to, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, some of that's like, and it takes too long to put up a campfire to like reactively, like you can't like, like the Fortnite joke, right? Turn it to a house. You can't build a campfire reactively if someone's bearing down on
Mm-hmm.
you, which is like not practical.
Yeah, I best you could like prepare a campfire, I guess.
Yeah. Or like like the reason that worked out for me is because I put it out of another quest for the same guy. There's like a bridge where you have to like kill a bunch of stuff. Because I put it down because if I died, I didn't want to go back like 500 feet or whatever. I happened to be lucky, right? So there's that. Um, it's interesting too because like this game was originally supposed to be like all crafting open world PvP. It was supposed to be like pure sandbox, and like this PvE stuff was kind of tacked on at the end. And I think it kind of feels like it, right? There's like a dozen different types of enemies, if that many, and they all just kind of like get leveled up over time. And like,
Yeah, and you understand their attack patterns and everything, right? Like you
yeah,
know, how many times have I fought one of those skeleton guys and he has this heavy attack that goes swing, 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 swing. Like that, I've seen that attack pattern a gazillion times, right? Um and on one hand, I think that's kind of important, right? That's like a foundational piece of any MMO puzzle is you learn the patterns of these enemies and you get good at fighting them. But I also just don't think that it reflects any real mastery of things. I mean, part of it that I find frustrating is that I can't animation cancel into a block, which I think that's like a design thing I would want to change. Where you know this is something that Vermintide does that I like is when you block, it takes precedence over everything else, right? So if you're in the middle of a swing but you see an incoming attack, you can react to it immediately by blocking, right? But the thing is that in Vermintide, blocking is also much weaker, right? So you have to be much more choice about your blocks than in New World, where I've kind of feels like my stamina bar is pretty infinite unless I'm going up against like really, really hardcore shit. And like the ability to dodge out of the way and stuff like that is so high that I have a lot of tools to avoid damage. So that feels like the trade-off that they opted into, right? You can block basically anything. Your stamina recharges quite a lot, and it's pretty easy to dodge everything too. But if you commit to attack, you are committed to it, and you're going to take a bunch of damage. Though also at the same time, I also at a certain point I realized that blocking was basically worthless, and I don't do it anymore. In any of the PvE scenarios, I basically just run up and spam my moves, and I have enough, because you get all these cooking mats or whatever. I just eat a pie every 4 or 5 mobs, and that's enough.
yeah, yeah.
Which I
I
don't
don't
think
do it
is
quite.
bad.
I don't do it quite that often, but I get what you're saying. I also like I Hammer has a bunch of CC on it, so I don't take that much damage.
That's
Um,
true. There was a while where I was using a different weapon, and then I swapped to the spear, which is really gross because the spear has a stun. Um, that made it much better and then I was like never taking damage at all. It felt like when I was using the spear, especially if you go melee ranged, right? So you open every fight with like big powerful ranged attacks, right? Like right now I'm using the bow, and that has like a 3-hit combo where it's like by the time anything reaches me, it's already at half health, and then I just unload my 3 abilities in a row, and the thing is dead. Even if it's like 5 levels ahead of me, it's probably dead, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. No, it's interesting because like the enemies with like the stun bar are the only things that like give me any trouble at all in that way, right? Because like or like the stamina bar because like they can like block like they can block attacks and keep me from stunning them. That's about it. I'm curious, what armor load are you going at? Like, are you doing the
I'm not worrying about it. I'm at heavy, but
okay?
I mostly just equip the best armor at any individual time.
Can you dodge at heavy? I haven't gotten to heavy at any point. I've been kind of
Your dodge is worse. It's like a little sidestep, but it's always been good enough for me.
okay. Yeah, no, I'm keeping myself at medium specifically because like I think the roll at light it takes up like 50% of your stamina, and I don't like it as much as like it's like a quarter for like the medium load short hop. Um, I don't know, I just like that a lot better. Um, but yeah, no, I've been it's been a lot of kind of like you were describing at the beginning like like oddly compelling or whatever, and like it's kind of like that like pure grind set type stuff that I think has been at least if it's not like super compelling like or like it has been compelling enough, right? Like in the way that you were describing it, kind of like go do something. um I think the fishing is actually pretty good, but it's like super slow. um which is always was my kind of like thing that I care about is how good the fishing is. Are you deep in any of the trade skills, or you just been logging?
I have been I think I am deep in some of the trade skills by happenstance. Just because I just was grinding a lot. Like I at a certain point, I just put on like I watched a bunch of movies. Like I watched The Perfect Storm and then It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2 like back to back to back. And I was basically just grinding stuff. I walked outside of town and I hit E on every tree I could and every rock I could for 6 hours straight. Which is honestly kind of embarrassing to admit. So, and then I brought them in and then I turned it into like planks and stone blocks. So I think I'm at like 38 woodworking and like 20 something stoneworking, but I have made nothing besides planks and stone blocks. Which is like, I feel like I'm in a South Park episode or something. Fuck. Um, oh my god. Okay.
So this is actually interesting because we were talking a little bit about before the podcast on that, because like my mining's pretty decent because you need iron for everything, and my logging's less so, but my harvesting is pretty big. But you don't like grind harvesting like that, or at least I haven't been. You mentioned their farms, and I've seen a couple of farms, but like to me, it's much more about like finding like the kind of like rare dubers out in the woods and being like, oh, I can't gather that yet, but like I've been gathering a bunch of hemp and herbs, and they're like harder to find, right? Like they're not quite as
Yeah,
like
that was exactly my problem, right? What I found was in the first zone I went to, which was Monarch Bluffs, um, I kept running into those big special nodes, and it was like, gotta be 30 to harvest, gotta be, whatever. I was like, how the fuck do I hit this? Like I haven't seen anything that's like harvestable. And then I went to a new zone, and in the new zone, the first quest took me to an area that's a farm that's overrun with corrupted bad guys. And so you can just kill those guys and you harvest like potatoes and carrots and shit. Um, and that was when I was like, oh my god, I'm now like farming or whatever, harvesting 28 or something. Like I got a gazillion levels just by grinding for an hour inside of that little quest area. Um, and so and it seems like logging and mining, I was able to just raw
I think they also
grind
progress
everything.
slower. I think this is intentional. I think the point is that like mining and logging are like you can just go and like hit buttons and get levels, right? Like this is for like the people who just like people call it like sublimation. It's like the pure grind. Like this is how I'm going to get my numbers up. Is I'm
I
just
mean,
doing
that was exactly the state I was
right,
in.
right. That's what you
Right?
described, right? Where it's like harvesting is I think a little bit more like, oh, there's a shiny thing, I'll go pick it up, right? Like type of
Yeah.
deal.
Well, one of the interesting things is that the nodes unlock over time, right? So, for
Yeah.
instance, the nodes they pop up on your map, and then it behaves like a WoW node, where you see it on the map and you go, oh, I want to go get it, right? And that triggered for me. It doesn't trigger. It triggers for mining, and it eventually triggered for harvesting. But that was at the end of my night kind of thing. But for mining, that triggered. That was a big deal because I needed iron. You know, like you get a bunch of iron ore for free just by doing like the base crafting stuff. But I wasn't able to like grind out any weapons besides that. And then eventually, I could see grinding. Or I'm sorry, I could see iron nodes all around the map, and I was like, oh shit! All of a sudden I am now grinding all the time, and I am running node to node to node to node because honestly, I guess I just missed a lot of iron ore because it doesn't stand out visually.
Part of it too is that like resources are very location based, right? Like there is like you said, like the farm has like the potatoes in it or whatever, right? Like you have to go to a zone that has a farm in it, right? Iron is near mountains.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Like I don't think there's a lot of hemp in New Light, but there's a lot of hemp in like by the quest giver. And so you have to go like seek these things out, which I think is an interesting design choice as well, right? Like
I also think that's an interesting design choice. Actually, now that you mention it. I think that's true. Yeah. Because yeah, that makes a lot of sense because the questing where I was getting all this iron was in a quarry. There's like a big quarry thing. I didn't really think about it in those terms. I just because I happened to unlock you can track nodes now at that time. But yeah, I think that's definitely true. Part of it is also just that like, you know, I actually think the most effective way to grind levels is to just do faction repeatable quests. Did you find this to be the case?
I just haven't done a ton of them because I'm more focused on trying to get like the main quest line done to get like my staff of Vazazoth or whatever it is.
Oh, so you can start doing the thing. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I saw that you need the staff of Azoth in order to do those corruption thingies. But now it makes sense that it comes from that fisherman guy. But anyway, so something that I was doing was I was trying a bunch of different stuff. So I was doing these mainline stories in the individual zones themselves, which are carbon copies of one another as far as I can see. Then I was doing these repeatable town missions for like town project completion, which was basically boring and also pretty uninteresting. And then I did a bunch of quests for the faction itself, which were also boring and uninteresting themselves, but I think they were the most efficient of those quests that I was doing. It seems like the town progress ones you want to do for standing. It felt like I got a gazillion standing in the territory for doing the town project quests. But I was mostly getting like hard experience every time I went back to my faction guy and I turned in a couple of quests there.
That's also the PvP quests are like super lucrative. They're like twice as much value. But like obviously if you die, you're fucked, right? Like you're murdered on the way. But I don't know. I think it's also super interesting to see that like not a ton of people have our PvP flagged on. Most of them are not, which I guess makes sense. Also makes sense because like I've been sticking to my faction's territories for the most part. I wonder if like there's more people like out in the frontier that are flagged.
I even understand. I did the full first zone was not my faction's territory, but my second zone is. But I don't even really. What is the difference between my zone and if somebody else owns the zone?
There's like some minor cost adjustments, right? Like each faction's like whichever company owns the town, that's the taxation rate. If you're teleporting between zones that your faction owns, you get discounts. Because like that Eternum resource is how you fast travel.
Fast travel, sure.
Yeah. It's used for a lot of things actually. But also like in like kind of a more generic sense, like helping the faction war effort in general is helped by those kinds of things, right? Like having a better forge is theoretically better for you because like the taxation money goes to the faction in some way, or at least to the guild. I don't quite understand all the intricacies of the mechanics.
Yeah, so the territory itself is owned by not just my faction, but also a guild of that faction. Right. Is that right?
Yeah. I think they're called companies, but yes.
Okay. Yeah, I have not joined a company.
Neither have I. Yeah. Basically, we have been deciding about whether or not we want to join one or try and start our own, but it's a matter.
Yeah, I feel like I should honestly just join one and like see what that life is like.
That's probably the right call. Yeah.
Or how or if that, makes any kind of difference, I guess. And then I also know that the faction has like a vendor where you can get like weapons or whatever. Like I'm pretty sure I'm saving my tokens, so that when I hit, I'm pretty close to the next rank. And when I hit the next rank, I'll be able to buy better gear or whatever, which I think is how you can do targeted upgrades, right? So if you're like, I'm just doing the thing where as soon as I get a weapon that's a better thing, I equip it just because whatever. Um, but if I do want to kind of focus in on, Warhammer and bow and arrow or whatever the two things I end up focusing on, um, I'll probably just be picking up the requisite bow and arrow and Warhammer from, the faction guy with those faction tokens.
Either that or you craft your own.
Or yeah.
Like the way you like specify upgrades is like you have to like mine out and happen to pull, or like defeat something and happen to pull like a modifier token that you can put on. It's kind of like
Actually kind of like that system, to be honest. Yeah.
It's kind of like the marks in WoW. And then you can use a turnum to like give it like a potential at a random upgrade, which is super cool. Like I think this system is really interesting and cool. I think unfortunately it's like easy to outpace it, at least initially. Like right now, like yesterday I went and I like had enough mats that I just like made 50 pairs of linen gloves, because like that was like the most efficient way to get like my levels up.
Oh my god, do you get linen from hemp?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my god, I need to farm hemp. I was like, I thought linen. I got it as a drop.
Yeah. Like
yeah, and I was like, oh my god, this is like cloth in WoW, but I don't think I've ever harvested a hemp bush. So
hemp gives you fiber, and then you use the loom to turn fiber into.
Okay, yeah, that makes so much sense. I don't think I've seen a loom yet. Actually, they must be in the town somewhere.
Yeah,
but
you can see them if you zoom in. You can see them. It's okay. But like it's like the other kind of like basic refining ones, like the lumber table or like the stone block thing. Is like you just like it's basically just used to turn stuff into others. Like turn base resource into like refined resource. I'm not actually sure if there are other, like I think a lot of those like you use them with like a refining agent to get the next level up. So it's not like you're ever kind of like getting new materials like you are with some of the other stuff.
Yeah, my problem with this is that I did exactly what you described. I outpaced immediately, where I made one weapon that was eye level 200, and I was like, "Oh, this is good." And then I went and I did more questing, and then I came back, and I was now sitting at 260 something. And it's like, well, why would I make a 200 Warhammer? When I could have a. And I think the real answer to that is maybe a well-statted weapon is better. Like I think there's a part of me that's probably sitting in the Destiny kind of like WoW mindset of like an eye level upgrade is an eye level upgrade, but really you want a good stat array, which is sort of like the Diablo, line of thinking, right? Where it really matters what you roll. This is also true of Warhammer, right? Where, it really matters what you roll, and you're willing to sacrifice, points of power in order to get a good, roll or whatever. But I don't know. My hope is that over the next couple of days, I will be able to just hard grind iron, and zoom out of this sort of mid-level, like this mid-level stage. Cause I don't know, I enjoy doing crafting stuff. Like obviously in WoW, right? I have all my legendaries maxed and all, and that's a fun and engaging interaction. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that's basically where I'm at too. Right, like I'm looking forward to this war after we finish this. It's at 9:30 Eastern time, so a little bit of a time. But I want to see what that's like. And just see if like see how like compelling any of that is. Do you see yourself doing any PvP stuff rather at all, or do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna try a war out. I don't know. The PvP is always an interesting I actually quite enjoy WoW PvP when I do it, but like it is with an understanding of kind of like fucking around, right? Um versus something like League or Hearthstone, which are like the PvP experiences where I get really into it, right?
Yeah.
I care a lot about Hearthstone. I cared a lot about League when I was playing those games. And WoW PvP has never gripped me that way. Really, any PvP in kind of an MMO that I've played, which are an insane number, right? Have never gripped me that way. So But I'm willing to be surprised, right? Like my plan is to definitely participate in a war and see if that's fun and interesting, because it sounds like the kind of thing that I would be very down for, right? Something that I've found frustrating, I guess, about WoW PvP sometimes is the sort of strategic depth kind of falls by the wayside to just killing people, right? And the thing that was enticing about League is that you can out rotate somebody, right? Sure, you can 1v1 somebody in lane. I'm gonna go eat this Lux alive on Yasuo. I'm gonna get 4
Right.
kills and then I'm gonna do whatever, right? But if the enemy team has a better strategic mind and moves around the map more tactically or whatever, like they can still win, right? um and my hope is that it will be something similar, because I understand that war, you have these capture points, around the map or whatever. That sounds cool, that sounds interesting, and it reminds me a lot of some of the olden days of like WoW, of like classic WoW PvP that I did used to participate in, right? Like, one of the things that's interesting about the settlement thing is that like that's something that we did in classic. We once took over Darnassus. It was like us and 2 other guilds, and we literally had shifts where we were running through Darnassus, because we were on Horde side, obviously. We were running through Darnassus. We were killing all of the guards, because we were all level 60 or whatever. Um, and we just ran through and we just killed everything constantly. We were just constantly, and you were doing that for hours on end, basically, to own, quote unquote, own the city. We couldn't even kill the Lobbies, right? Lobbies come in from Darnassus and just walk right by you, because and those in even on a PvP server in the capital cities, they can turn PvP off and not get killed by us. So this is sort of a gamified version of that. That was obviously emergent gameplay on our part. We just sort of abused the systems at hand. But now I actually could legitimately like go take over a town.
Yeah, I mean, and part of it too is that like level disparities aren't nearly as important, or at least it seems that way, right? Like I can go like toe to toe, and like I'll probably like I'm at a disadvantage with somebody like 10 levels up from me, but it's not impossible, right? Like
Yep.
it's like 3 levels and you're fucked, right? Like
and you can like affect the outcome in meaningful ways, right? Where it's like, even if somebody else is a higher level, but like it's 2 versus 1, right? You can sort of win that. Or you have a good like weapon combo that is strong into their weapons, which I like a lot.
yeah, no, I agree, I agree. Right?
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Do you have any more complex thoughts about New World? Do you have any interest in doing like end game content that's not PvP? Like, what about like the dungeons or whatever?
I theoretically have an interest, but like I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know like if the dungeon's just like killing a bunch of mobs in a row. Like I don't know if that's interesting. I don't know what it looks like. I do it once and like evaluate after that, but like
Yeah, I have a sense that the way that the action combat has made the leveling more fun, right? It has made dungeons much worse. I don't think I will have fun walking into a dungeon and you like performing a rotation with these 3 abilities. I guess you could say 5 abilities, because you have light attack and heavy attack, right?
I mean
Um,
you also have like weapon swaps. So you've got like two sets, right? Like
yeah. But it's just like that does not appeal to me at all. I'm just like, boy, that seems like,
so if they make the
I don't
enemies
know.
interesting, which I haven't seen any interesting enemies so far, you could at least get like some like Destiny, right? Like there's mechanics to it, even though
Yeah,
like you've
that's
got like
true.
a smaller set of of abilities. But I think it could be compelling, but I haven't seen anything that would indicate they've done anything to do that. But I haven't played the dungeon, so I don't know. Um, that's like I'll give it a
Yeah,
shot.
my feeling is generally that I feel like if you want to do dungeons and raids, right, you probably need to be a tab targeting MMO. Because my understanding is that, like, obviously 14 and WoW are the 2 big tab target MMOs, right? But my understanding is that other games that aren't tab targeting, so like Guild Wars 2, for instance, um, is much less about those sorts of activities, just because it's much harder to make those things feel good without,
I know that
the
like
ability to sort of lock on and do
what was the name?
the bundling of mechanics that comes with a tab targeting MMO, I feel like
I
makes
see
it
what you're
work.
saying, but I don't see why you couldn't do some of that stuff with like a action combat. Like what is the name of it? It's like it was a long running one. It's kind of like falling off now, but it's a big action MMO. It's got like Panda people.
Are you sure it's not Guild Wars is the action combat MMO that I think of, but
I'm thinking of it begins with like an E.
Elder Scrolls? No way, right?
No.
Not Phantasy Star. What are other MMOs I can think
of? This is like an older one.
An older. Oh man, I had to take a call right as we got into Guild Wars 2 rating. To be fair, I don't know anything. Oh, and I was so happy to bash the fuck out of it. Okay. I don't know Guild Wars 2 rating. I just have only heard bad things, right? That if you are interested in playing Guild Wars 2, the dungeons and the raids are not the fun part. That's not what you're there for. I tested that shit. It's not. So yeah, like this is not firsthand knowledge. This is just, my understanding of the world as I have heard it. Eternal Quest, Escelia, Eden New Dawn. I'm just looking at MMOs on.
Let me.
What are we looking at? Try rating and combat system with no real tank, no real threat system, and no real healer. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of
Terra.
what.
Terra is the game I'm thinking of.
Okay,
which is Terra, not an E, but there's an E in it, which
I don't know really anything at all about Terra, so fair enough.
Yeah, so it's an action combat game, and like the enemies have like 17 life bars, and there's like the bosses do, and there's a good amount of mechanics to it, and but it's like a pay to win thing. So,
rip. Terra is the best game for pedophiles.
Oh.
Woof.
Yeah, I mean, it's got like it's got like it's like all like the Asian games. There's like a lolly race, right? Like 14 has the what was it, the
Lala? No, not Lalafell.
Yeah, Lalafell. That's the name of them, I think.
Oh wait, it's Lalafell?
Isn't it?
Okay. Fuck. I thought that was the 11 version. There's a 14 version and 11 version, and they're called different things.
Yeah, Lalafell is the 14 version. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Lalafell is 14. Man, what is the Final Fantasy 11 version? Taru is the 11 version. Yeah, that was what I was thinking of. Taru.
All right. Well, yeah, and they like isn't there a character in 14 that's like named like that, like Taru or something like that? It's like the good guy's like secretary.
Well, yeah, because you have your party of buds in 14 that you do the main story quest.
Yeah.
I don't know. All I know is that some people are really horny for one guy in the party. Like he said.
I mean that could describe literally any game, any character in any game.
That's true. That's honestly, I bet it describes all of the guys in the party. I vaguely remember that there was one that people would refer to as the thirst trap.
Fair enough. But we can move on maybe to things.
I think my ending point with New World is that it compels me in the same way that I when we had Classic, I talked about how Classic had a magic to it, right? Which came out of all of these things that had been changed via quality of life updates, right? Like having this inventory space, having to run everywhere, having like money be a real thing where you have to like afford a flight path, and you might choose to run instead of take the flight path because you don't have just like essentially infinite gold, right? And New World has done a really commendable job in capturing those magical things in a new game and in a new experience.
In a new world?
Yeah. The real question for me is like, how much is this going to last, right? Like, yeah, obviously I'm a little burnt on WoW at the moment. I think of this as waxing and waning, right? Which is like, there are times when WoW is like the shit, and all I want to do is fucking, like, and I'm super into it. And at the end of 9.0, weirdly, that was where I was at. In the beginning of 9.1, that was also very where I was at. But like at this point, I've timed all of my 15s. We've gotten KSM. There's only one rate, like only upgrades from Kel'Thuzad and Sylvanas, right? So there's just really not a lot of gear out there. I got the Torghast mount. It feels like I've done a lot of the things, and until 9.2 comes out with a bunch of new content, I'm probably relatively off of WoW at the moment. And the same thing is true of Hearthstone, which I also got into, weirdly at the beginning of the last kind of expansion cycle. So New World has hit at a point where, you know, it's kind of hit at the same point that Valheim hit me 6 months ago, right? Where I was also waning on WoW pretty hard, and I wasn't spending a lot of time in the game, and I wasn't, we weren't pushing mythics really hard or whatever. But I don't know. I think it will be fun to sort of like ride that high. But as I'm playing more Vermintide, Hearthstone Mercenary comes out tomorrow, which is like which is a Hearthstone. It's Hearthstone Pokemon basically. I could very easily see New World sort of like fall by the wayside, and we'll see in the next couple of in the next couple of months where New World lives in the overall ecosystem.
That's very fair. No, I could see the same thing happening. It probably depends on how coherent the group of people I'm playing with stays together, right? Like,
Yep.
um, you know,
Yeah, I mean that group has been coherent in the past, right? Like when we were playing League, that was an incredibly coherent group. But it has also been very fickle in the past, right? Like there
yeah,
are times where we've played something and we've maybe gone hard on that thing for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then we just kind of overnight it's over.
yeah. No, I mean, part of it depends and also on like the secondary cast, right? Like if people are like still into it, like I played Destiny a lot with Monarch and X at various times.
Yeah,
But
sure.
it depends on if it sticks or not. When people get busy with things, right? Like life, all that
Yeah.
jazz. But yeah, so otherwise, how's your week been?
Boy, how has my week been? I played a bunch of New World. I played a bunch of Vermintide, which so I want to talk a little bit about the differences between Vermintide and New World that I think make Vermintide better, and why I said before that like the Vermintide combat does a lot of things that I kind of wish New World does. First of all, it is a little bit different because Vermintide is it's what I call a damage density game, in the sense of uh Vermintide is like this. Basically every horde game I've ever played is like this. Payday is specifically like this, where it is not so much about any individual instance of damage, right? It is about your damage over time, and it is about how densely you can pack your damage to reduce a big mass of incoming damage, if that makes sense, right? So something that'll happen in Vermintide, for instance, is you will trigger what's called a horde, where it's just a giant flood of enemies will be coming at you. And the only way to survive a horde is to have high damage density, where you are putting out enough damage that you can chew through the horde before it chews through you, right? And there's also other, sometimes it's a single monster that kind of functions as this miniature boss fight. Sometimes it's a pack of elites that have armor and you can only damage them with heavy attacks, or you only damage them with certain kinds of attacks, right? Or it's a special that will show up, and these things will overlap with one another, right? Where you're fighting a horde at the same time that a monster spawns, or you are fighting a pack of a big patrol of elites, and one of your guys gets snagged by an abducting special unit or something like that, right? Like, and it is managing all of those different sort of interactions where you are putting out enough damage to get rid of the elites, or to kill the monster fast enough that you can then focus back on the horde, all that kind of stuff. I feel like all of that works on the principle of the enemies are coming at you no matter what, and you have to kind of react to that onslaught, right? Which is different than the way that New World is structured, because New World is structured where you essentially get to pick your battles, right? I have seen that the respawn timers for mobs in New Worlds is incredibly short, all
Yeah,
things considered. So it's very common for me to be in a battle with something and something respawns behind me, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go deal with this guy, that I just killed 2 minutes ago, but he's back now. And I'm all of a sudden kind of like doing a 2-for-1 sort of engagement. Um, but the lack of this sort of damage density challenge metric sort of removes my feeling of um wanting to save resources like abilities for important moments, right? Um, which I think is a little bit problematic, right? Like something that Vermintide 2 does with ammo that I think is interesting is you have very specific ammo checkpoints, right? Where in the map there is an ammo box on the ground, and that's when you can refill your ammo, and it's otherwise very limited, right? And even if you're playing a ranged class, if you just dump all of your ammo at every individual mob you see, you will run out of it pretty quickly, and that's bad. And you can mitigate this, right? Like I'm at an end game point in Vermintide where I have set up a build that refunds me a lot of ammo. I'm refunded ammo on headshots. Um, I'm refunded ammo when I use my special in a certain way or whatever the case may be, right? But that's that's a power choice that I walk into, right? Where I say I would much rather have my ranged weapon up at all times than I would the other power options that having a better legendary effect or having a different, talent in that row would kind of have. And I don't really feel that sense when it comes to New World combat. I don't have any, really what I'm describing is I don't have any like big cooldowns, right? In the way that in Vermintide or in WoW, I'm going to be saving Bladestorm for specific moments, right? I have my Bladestorm timing really down in the Soul Render Dormazane fight so that when ads spawn and they get grouped up, I'm going to Colossus Smash Warbreaker, the Bladestorm those ads, and that's when I'm, that saving that cooldown feels good. I don't have any cooldowns to save in New World. And moreover than that, I don't have a lot of like resource to build or spend when it comes to that. The only resource really it seems like is stamina, but that's entirely defensive. I think technically if you throw hatchets, you use strength or you use stamina for each hatchet throw, but otherwise it feels like I have none of that kind of conservation. There's never a need to conserve and there's never a need to sort of spend, which means that I don't feel like I have a lot of tactical options in how I am approaching a problem, right? Every problem is being approached by, well, I use my 3 abilities, or I use my 3 ranged abilities, then it gets into melee and I swap to my melee weapon, I use my 3 melee abilities. And that's kind of the overall problem as I see it when it comes to sort of New World's combat by way of, Vermintide, and I guess also a little bit of WoW, but mostly Vermintide is my touch point here.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree with you, but I think a lot of that stems out of the fact that, again, this was supposed to be a PvP only game, and they got scared and backed off of it.
Yeah.
Like I think you can make the PvE content in New World more compelling with like smarter enemies, or like I don't know, like I've gotten some hairy situations where I've like had to deal with like a handful of them at a time, but like there's only like so much that you can go with that, right? Like, and there's also like weapons that like musket is not great for PvE, just because like you can't shoot fast enough to like because you're just trying to like put damage into enemies as opposed to like do anything smart with it.
Yeah. Also, are there headshots?
Yes, there are.
I have had weird experiences where I'm like, was that a headshot? I don't understand
Yeah.
because there's crits, but I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have been very confused with whether or not there are headshots.
There definitely are for muskets. I don't know how it works for bows.
Yeah,
I
maybe
think they
not
do.
for.
I think
I've
they
I've
do.
used bows, hatchets. I've used magic, but I actually haven't used the musket that much.
Yeah, I
Just
think
because I haven't rolled one.
I'm pretty sure the spear, there's a tree that lets you throw the spear. I think it says like it's got a special effect on a headshot.
Oh,
So.
interesting. I am not that. I am the melee spear spec, but yeah, I am the. I did the ranged hatchet spec, which I actually like quite a lot, and I think maybe my ideal end game setup might be Warhammer Hatchet. I think those are maybe the two that I've had the most fun with. I do like the spear a lot though, but I like the melee spear. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. On my end, I started reading what's it called? The Time for Stars, which is a Robert Heinlein novel. Um, about like basically humanity's exploring the stars, and it's discovered that twins can communicate. Like not only twins, but like twins are the most common version where like they can communicate psychically. And they just like if you like you have to kind of like people can kind of do it, but like no one really realized they were doing it until they studied it. But the big thing there is that it moves faster than the psychic communication is faster than the speed of light. Like it's near instantaneous, and so that lets them like communicate over long distances. And so like the plot follows a set of twins, one of which is on, or it follows one twin who is on the Star Cruiser and is communicating back to Earth with his twin, and traveling relativistically. I'm like a part of the way through the book, but it's interesting. More crawling through classic sci-fi. Otherwise, you don't have a lot that's like relevant to this podcast. Like, I installed doorbells today.
Yeah, I don't know. I also didn't do a ton of stuff. I watched a bunch of movies. I watched Have you ever seen The Perfect Storm?
No.
I don't know why, but I just was like, I need to watch this movie. Because I think mostly what it came down to was it was like one of those dumb things where somebody like made a stupid reference to it in like a YouTube video. And like, oh, you know what it was? Is I watched a YouTube video essay. Okay, I watched a YouTube video essay. It was about the Matrix sequels because I'm gearing up for, you know, our Matrix stuff, which is theoretically coming any minute now, right? And I watched a whole YouTube of episodes about how the Matrix sequels are good actually, which is that is a viewpoint that I have, but I actually think that essay was wrong for a wide variety of reasons. And one of the things they referenced was The Perfect Storm. I was like, what a weird fucking reference, right? Like, who remembers this movie? It's from the year 2000. I thought it had John Turturro in it. Does not. It has Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney in it. Okay, you know. And spoiler alert, they all die. That was the reference that they made. Is that I guess the movie was spoiled in some way or whatever. And I was just like, I gotta go like watch this.
It's probably spoiled because it's based on a real thing that happened.
Yeah. It's based on yeah. Well,
a perfect
I guess,
storm.
Yeah, well we don't know the story. I think it is based on real guys that died.
Yeah,
but it is one of
like,
those things
yes,
where
we do not know the full story because they are dead and they could not tell us.
Yeah, because they are dead. They couldn't tell us, right? I don't know why. I mean, if you remember, there was a couple of weeks ago where I got really into Titanic stuff, right? Like the nature of shipwrecks I have found to be fundamentally incredibly interesting. Like, do you know about the Edmund Fitzgerald?
Is that one of the Northwest Passage ships?
It is no. The Edmund Fitzgerald is it was like a big cargo ship that sank in, I want to say Lake Superior, or maybe it was one of the Great Lakes, right? Um but it had a really interesting, like, nobody really could understand how it sank at first. And then eventually they figured it out, right? That it was just like the way it was a huge storm, and it was the way the waves were going was that it was depressing so much that the Edmund Fitzgerald smacked the bottom of, like the bottom of one of the Great Lakes, which I was like, holy fuck, like those are deep ass lakes or whatever. And it ruptured the hull. And yeah, and there's a bunch of stuff with like the people who died in the Edmund Fitzgerald are still there, and they are relatively well preserved because of the weird eccentricities of it being, they're not like frozen, right? But it is at such a temperature that they get covered in this like special waxy substance or whatever, which is like a huge thing. And like there are divers that go and they do spooky shit or whatever. But now that's illegal. Canada made it illegal because it's on the Canada side of the thing or whatever.
Damn
it's a whole,
Canadians.
there's all this drama. So I was very interested in The Perfect Storm, just from the shipwreck drama or whatever. And then I also
if you're
watched,
interested in shipwreck drama, you should check out Canadian shipwreck drama in particular. You should do some reading on the adventures to try to course through the Northwest Passage, which is
see, I know about that because the Terror, right? The Terror is the
you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing, I've watched, there's a History Buffs episode. Do you know the YouTube channel History Buffs?
No.
It's just like a guy who's a historian, but he reviews historical movies and TV shows, and he basically, he does it's actually funny. He does a traditional review in that he describes whether or not he thinks the thing is good, but also describes the history of it. Like famously, he actually really likes 300, but he's like, it's so stylized and fantastic that it is not meant to be historical, right? Like, for whereas, there are other movies that he thinks of as just like complete garbage because they are both trying to be, realistic, but also telling very bad, dumb history.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, he did an episode on the Terror, which is one of the ships that I think was the next to last, right? Like it was the ship after the Terror that successfully charted the Northwest Passage. And the Terror was close to charting the Northwest Passage, but there was like a freak 3-year, you know, cold spell that kept the Northwest Passage entirely frozen, which in any other situation they probably would have been fine, but just because of the freak weather of that set of years, um they all died basically, and there was a huge question about how they died for the longest time.
Well,
And
because there was some thought that like some of them might have managed to wander off and like find like Inuit tribes or something, right? And there's
yeah,
like
and
the cannibalism
there
angle,
is good
right?
evidence. Yeah, there is good evidence that they did meet with Inuit tribes. But eventually they found the remains were found, and they did DNA testing, and they found out that at the very end they resorted to cannibalism, which was this huge thing because oh no 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 upstanding Britishmen would they would die with dignity and not consume the hands and feet of their
Well,
fellow sailors or whatever.
yeah, I think that's so. If I remember correctly, the Resolute desk, right? Like the presidential desk.
Mhm.
Like I for a long time assumed that was just kind of like a this is the desk the president does Resolute things at. It's from the
Oh, you're
HMS
right.
Resolute, which was one of the rescue missions. I don't know if it was a rescue mission after one of the Northwest Passage expeditions. And I think the ship was found basically abandoned. And then the Americans towed it back to like Boston. And then the American government was like, let's just be nice. And like they gave it back to England as like a gift, as like a show of good faith. And then when they decommissioned it, the British made it into a desk and gave it to America. It's like another
Oh
sign of
yeah, okay.
goodwill.
So yeah. This is perfect. The HMS Resolute was abandoned in like the Arctic waterway while it was searching for this expedition that I'm talking about,
The
John
Terror.
Franklin. Yeah, this is the
Yeah,
the
okay.
it's
The
the
Franklin
Franklin
expedition.
expedition.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
And it was found and towed away by an American whaling ship, the George Henry. It was repaired and returned to the United Kingdom as a gesture of goodwill, and then the ship was decommissioned, broken up, and the desk was a gift from Queen Victoria to Rutherford B. Hayes. Good job, Rutherford. You made it into Wikipedia
If
for
you'd like,
this
if you'd
thing.
like an entertaining but longer explanation, GM Word of the Week has one on the Resolute desk. Weirdly, or it's called like I think it's Resolute, and they go through that whole history because like the Northwest Passage is a whole thing, right? Like I got into specifically the Northwest Passage history because there's a song by I'm telling you that I can't remember it. It's called Northwest Passage. It's like sometimes called the unofficial Canadian national anthem. Um, uh, and it's basically about a guy. It's Stan Rogers. That's the guy's name. It's about like a guy who's like driving the Northwest Passage route and like trying to find himself. But it's like filled with all this like these like um nods to like the historical stuff. And so I did a bunch of reading on it at some point. It's a very soulful song. It's a good song.
Oh,
Dan
cool.
Rogers is an interesting dude too because he was like Canada's like one of Canada's like musical stars. But like he died in like a Cincinnati airport fire. Like young, like 30s, I think. Um, so it's that is how I got from to like learning about like the Northwest Passage and the HMS Resolute and all that. It's very
Yeah,
fun stuff.
I also learned of the Edmund Fitzgerald through a song. The Ontario singer-songwriter Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song called "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald," which I ended up listening to. I just like went down this incredible weird rabbit hole, right? Where what it was I was watching real-time sinking videos, right? Of like the Titanic sinking. I watched that like 8 times. Then I started watching other ships sink in real time. Then it recommended me this song, which I then listened to, which I then went and looked up videos explaining all of this stuff about the Edmund Fitzgerald or whatever. So, yep,
Yeah, no, I mean
yep.
Canadian I assume this is like a soulful, slow, like kind of like ballad, right? Like a Newfoundland.
I guess so, yeah.
Well, I'm asking you about this. Like, is that what the song is?
Yeah, it's from the 70s, like the Edward Fitzgerald sank pretty recently, all things considered. This is not like an old sinking. This was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
sinking
Well,
from
I mean,
like
and Stan Rogers, like he's also relatively recent, right? Like he sang about the Northwest Passage, but it's like him driving, right? Like it's like a modern
okay.
song, because like you
Yeah,
also
okay,
got
yeah,
like
it sank in 1975. So,
yeah, and like yeah, and the song Northwest Passage came out in 1981, so like and like there's I think I think it's called it's not the Chemical Brothers, Chemical Workers song is by right? It's these is like weird Canadian like working man songs. It's called Great Big Sea. Like they're all pretty great. Um, but if you want to watch a very modern version of this, um, Internet Historian did a whole like 40-minute video. I think it's on maybe a second channel about the Italian cruise ship that crashed
oh,
and
I did
sank.
watch that one. Yes, that was absolutely the Concordia or whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he
the
goes like
Concorde.
minute by minute as the guy fucks up and crashes that cruise ship. Uh,
And he abandons ship and tries to run away. Right, like it's
yeah.
like, oh man.
He has his like mistress on board or whatever. Oh man, that's the good shit right there.
Yeah. So what else happened this week? Fucking Sora's gonna be in Smash. You care?
I don't know. I think I would care. I wanted it to be somebody else.
Who
I
did you want it to
remember
be?
my I wanted it to be Master Chief. I think that would have been the coolest one, right? Because I think of Halo and Smash in a very similar context. Like they were out at around the same time, and I was playing them in about the same context, the original Halo and in Super Smash Brothers, right? Like, and maybe this was just like those are consoles in technically different generations, 64 and the original Xbox, but they just happened to be like the two games that I was playing a lot of like PvP of at the time, and then eventually Halo 2 and that kind of
Right,
thing.
and like Melee is concurrent with Halo.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, and then we got into Melee super hard. So I just think of those as very compelling. So Sora was, I like Sora well enough
Nick
alone,
says
I
he
guess.
points out that it should have been Dante, and I agree. It should have been Woohoo Pizza Boy.
Ooh, I felt like there was a compelling argument for Dante. Okay, that's
Yep.
fair. I think there are a lot of good answers, right? Like
Yeah, oh,
I
yeah.
think Smash could support a lot of characters. Honestly, you could kind of do like really crazy out there stuff, and I think you could still convince me that
Yeah.
that it would make a good Smash character.
The crazy thing about Sora, and this is like totally aside from any gameplay stuff, it's just like the licensing weirdness, right? Because like it's
Oh
like
yeah.
like there's like some joke I saw. It's like 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 the heavy line like fire this gun for like 6 seconds cost $4 million to show the keychain for 5 seconds cost $4 million, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things about Kingdom Hearts, so I think there's like a bigger kind of cultural conversation about like the state of Disney, right? Because I don't think people now, Disney is this it is the cultural juggernaut on the planet Earth, right?
yeah,
It is the number one thing that dominates our planet's culture, right? Which is a monumental thing to think about. But 15 years ago, right, in 2003 when Kingdom Hearts is coming out, that was absolutely not the case. Disney was like 4th or 5th behind these other ones, right?
well, was it
Um
do you think it was really fourth or fifth? Like who was ahead of it?
well, this was during the Bob. It absolutely was. The dominant box office stuff at that time was stuff coming out not from Disney in the 90s was like failing. Um,
But it still had a lot
and
of cultural cachet, right? Like the animated
well, so yeah, this is exactly my point. What nobody really recognized was how incredibly powerful the Disney animation renaissance happening in the 90s, right? Like the early 90s, kind of The Little Mermaid up through The Lion King, would be to influence our generation, right? Like
okay, yeah,
our
sure.
generation of
Yeah.
millennials, right? And so in 2003, we were just entering teenage. We're like barely consumers at that point, right? In the sense of active consumers. Obviously, our parents are buying stuff for us, and that includes Disney paraphernalia, right? But like we are not dictating a lot of purchasing decisions, right? Um, but then Kingdom Hearts comes out, and at the time, 2003 was when Disney kind of won a big hit with Pirates of the Caribbean, which was a huge hit for them, made them a boatload of money that they sorely needed, right? But at the time, that like Kingdom Hearts, it was easy to get rights for that kind of stuff because nobody cared about it. Like video games were this other thing. Nobody was really doing anything with that. So it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll license you my video game, like these characters in a video game or whatever. And the first Kingdom Hearts does relatively well. Kingdom Hearts 2 kind of comes out or whatever. But over the next couple of years, as we, mature into actual consumers, right? Like as millennials mature into these actual consumers that can dictate kind of like merchandising and like purchasing and all that kind of stuff. Now all of a sudden, like the Disney is at the forefront and is making gobs of money off of like Jack Skellington sweatshirts that
Also,
sell at
Marvel.
Hot Tocket. And then that snowballs into Marvel, and that snowballs into Star Wars, right? In the late 2000s, early 2010s or whatever. And now they've just been for the last 10 years just like the kings of everything, right? So it is interesting, and it's always interesting to me to think about like where the Disney that was that the genius, whoever it was, that signed the first deal to license shit to Square Enix for Kingdom Hearts, right?
I think they actually, I think it's co because I don't think it's like a pure licensing deal, right? Like I think Disney has some creative control, right? Um,
Okay,
I
sure.
think that, I mean, they always do, right? Like I think that's part of
Yeah,
like
yeah,
their deal. But like I know that I think his name's Nomura, the Japanese guy, the game director.
sure.
Um, I think he has separate control over Sora, which is why he was able to get Sora. And there, if you notice, there's like not a lot of Disney stuff in the character, which I think is partly a
Yeah,
design choice by Sakurai, because he's always wanted Smash to be a celebration of video games, not like pop culture in general. And
yep.
Sora is definitely that. Like, but like there's no none of the Disney costumes with the exception of like the Steamboat Willie costume. Um, they're all
Yeah,
like
I also just kind of don't feel like part of my thing with Sora is that it feels like Sora doesn't have an iconic move set in the way that I want him to, which they have dealt with before. Obviously, like Ganondorf kind of
right.
didn't have an iconic move set and gained one through Smash or whatever. But it just feels like when I'm talking about something like adding Master Chief, right? Like Master Chief has a real move set that you could think of. You and I could sit here and be like, wouldn't it be cool if his over B was, right?
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be sweet if his up B was this,
yeah.
right? Or he pulled out, some interesting or like a cool sort of like throwback move or whatever. And you can do that for a lot of different characters, I feel like. It's tough for me to do that with Sora, all things considered.
Yeah, because especially like his move set in the direct is like some of it's like Final Fantasy stuff, right? Like the Blizzaga, Thundaga, Faraga, right?
Yep.
And then there's like I don't know, he's there, but he doesn't. It didn't feel like the aerial stuff feels just kind of like that's kind of how the game plays, but it's not like diegetically he's supposed to be like an aerial master. That's just kind of like the way that
Yeah,
the
that's
game
just
plays them.
sort of the way that Kingdom Hearts plays,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess, which,
I mean that's valid, but it's not like you know, um, I don't know. It's also hard, like especially since there's no Disney stuff, right? Like the things that are kind of about Sora are like having like Donald and Goofy, right? And like they're not there at all, right? Like yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not so mad that Dante's not there. I like Dante a lot. And it could have been Nero too, right? Like I just wanted a DMC character because it was hot and it seemed like he was going to be one of the earlier characters and he wasn't. I also thought it would have been cool to have like another fighting game character, right? Have Scorpion, right? Like from Mortal
yeah,
Kombat. Um,
I think that would have been awesome if you have Scorpion for Mortal Kombat for sure.
um, yeah.
Goofy and Donald are dead weight. That's what Kingdom Hearts has taught me. Yeah.
Um, I, that is actually like of I mean, I guess we got Banjo Kazooie, but something that was like, maybe a little bit disappointing is that like the it felt very Japanocentric, which seems to be like a very like Nintendo not recognizing the West as much, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
I think somebody should like I think they were like put a Gears of War character in it, just work with us, we'll do it, right? Like
Whoa.
and they didn't, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Kaplan famously said
oh,
he
Overwatch,
can
right?
have any Overwatch character, right? Which, to be honest, I have never liked that just because I think Blizzard has its own version of Smash and it's Heroes of the Storm. And it's
Right.
like, And frankly, I think Here's the Storm is better at capturing the like, I don't know that I could make a Smash version of Varian Rin that is more iconic than the Here's the Storm version. Like, it's I sort of fundamentally don't think that's possible just because wow, the Blizzard games are built more towards this PC interface than towards like a
Yeah.
console controller's interface. So
Overwatch needs to give up the name Zenyatta. They don't deserve it.
is that a reference to something?
Secret True. Do you have deeper thoughts on that? Because I'm not quite sure I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah, I actually don't. Yeah, I don't necessarily understand.
But yeah, it's an interesting thought. I don't know. Do you have a racehorse?
There's a great female racehorse by that name. Okay, fair enough.
I'll leave it there. I don't think. I think it's a good place to leave it because I don't think I could.
That is a good place to end it. Sure.
All right. Zenyatta Mandata, the police. Oh, it's that sounds familiar. Interesting. Very interesting. So, Secret Truth says, owned by Jerry Moss, who connects to the police, who had the album Zenyatta Mandata. Yep. I think that's a good place to leave it. Like I said, if you would like to email us about your thoughts about Zenyatta naming conventions, or about New World, or about any other things you talked about in this podcast, you can email us at somedirtsplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@somedirtsplaygames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/dirtsplaygames where these episodes go out live. We also put them out on SoundCloud, and eventually YouTube, although I'm sometimes a little bit slow about getting those out. I think that's everything I had. Buddy, do you have anything you want to promote?
I have nothing else. Oh, I actually do have a small thing that I'm promote. Shh, don't tell anybody. I'm gonna be doing a secret. I'm gonna do a secret stream tomorrow. I'm gonna do a secret Aquaparta stream where I'm gonna play Hearthstone Mercenaries.
Okay.
So if you wanna come hang out on stream, actually I wrote an announcement in the Aquaparta game, but I wrote it like I was on an episode of The Sopranos. Just like, don't tell nobody, like. Yeah, so I'm gonna be streaming Hearthstone Mercenaries on my lunch tomorrow on the Aquaparta Games account. So if you want to take a look at what Hearthstone Pokemon is like, feel free to
drop on
join up
by.
March 11.
All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.